Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Open Forum podcast. Today, we have with us Professor Bob DeWitt, Professor of Strategic Leadership at the Nyenrode Business University, founder and owner of Strategy Works and Strategy Academy, as well as publishing multiple books and articles, including Strategy and International Perspective, published in multiple countries, used in multiple universities the world over. But Bob, it's lovely to have you here. And you've given your unique take of strategy and what it is that's going on in the world in your fantastic book, Society 4.0. Why don't you take a couple minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, you gave a nice introduction. So my whole life, I combine practical things like advising companies with an academic position. So I'm a professor of strategic leadership. And I do that for a very long time. And actually, my field is to understand the future. That's where the word strategy comes from. And yeah, if you want to understand the future, you have to be, well, multidisciplinary, as they call it, because sometimes the future related to economics and then technology and then politics. So you need to be very multidisciplinary. And I did it for a very long time. And indeed, what you said, I wrote a book, an academic book, that's being used in 75 countries, which is called Strategy, an International Perspective. Also translated into a couple of languages, including Chinese. So I'm quite well known in my own academic field. And basically what happened is that in 2011, my professional field changed a little bit. And that was because of the publication of a book from Jeremy Rifkin called The Third Industrial Revolution. So basically what he said is, first we had steam and then oil and now computers. Basically, that's what he is arguing. And from the beginning, I had a sort of intuition that something was not right. But I didn't know what it was. And that took until 2015. In 2015, then I was preparing a public lecture. And then suddenly I understood what was not right about Jeremy Rifkin. And my speech was called On the Eve of a Societal Revolution. So basically what I said as from 2015 is, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the eve of a fundamental change of our society, much more fundamental than Jeremy Rifkin said. Well, and that was the beginning of, years of giving presentations in many countries with this message. And waiting until something would happen. And that was in the beginning of 2020. Well, you remember probably. There were intelligent lockdowns. And then from that moment on, I thought, well, this could be the beginning of what I'm saying for a couple of years now. So I tried to falsify myself. That's what you do as a scientist, which was not successful. And then I knew, no, this is the beginning of a societal revolution. There will be one revolution, there come more crises. And this is the beginning of a fundamental change. Well, and that was the beginning of writing my book, Society 4.0. When I explain, the time that we live in on one and the other, give a vision of how the future might look like, basically.
Okay. And just to clarify, when Bob said he tried to falsify himself, what he means there is to prove the negative in that instance. To see if it was possible to disprove the theory, if anyone was a bit confused there. So basically, the long and short of it is we're on the precipice of a societal revolution, is what you're saying. And obviously, the title of the book is Society 4.0. So we've gone through these societal upheavals in the past. And I think upheaval is probably a good word to use. Is something you've said multiple times in other interviews and in your book, is that as you move from one society to the next, there's going to be periods of instability, of uncertainty, of people wanting to hold on to the things that gave them the power that they have in the society as it stands. Could you maybe give us a brief sort of overview of what the prior societies were, what it was that changed, and fundamentally then, what is it that we have to look to going forward?
Yeah. Well, it's called Society 4.0 because the fourth time we go to a different kind of society. That's where the name comes from. For over 3,000 years, we have lived in a society in which the most important way to make money is to have land. Because a society is always organized to the primary source of economic value creation. You know how you make money, to be simple. So over 3,000 years, we had a society in which a small group of landowners were rich and powerful, and most of the people were powerless and poor. Basically, that's what it was. And so for 3,000 years, people thought that this was the only way to organize a society. Even it went back to the old Greeks, because the Plato said, the only way to make important decisions about a society is to put the decisions in the hands of the powerful and the rich, because they know how to do that. Normal people cannot do that. So this was for 3,000 years. So you can imagine that after 3,000 years, people thought, well, this will be forever. And still there came a change. And I'm happy to say that the Netherlands, the country that I come from, was very important in that. And that had to do with our geography, our location. The Netherlands is well located on the mainland. So we have a lot of mainland in Europe. And also on the sea. And the Dutch had a very long maritime tradition. And what happened is that more and more trade become more important than land ownership. And what happened is that there came a number of trade cities. And in the trade cities, the landowners, well, they were not so powerful anymore. Now, what happened in a lot of countries, for example, Singapore, Monaco, they were also trade cities, and they became city-states within the old system. But in the Netherlands, that was not possible for two reasons. One is there were too many trade cities, not one or two, but there were many. Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Enkhuizen, Zwolle, there were many trade cities, too many. And the second is they also had to cooperate against the water, because water is the main enemy of the Netherlands. And then there was a moment that they said, we don't want this anymore. And at that time, King Philip II of Spain was the king of the Netherlands. And then we have an act of abandonment. And we said to Philip II, thank you for your services, but we're going to do it differently. Then we abandoned the old system. We left the feudal society. We left the society that was led by the elite. Then again, what you said, 7 years, it was, a lot of unrest. For 7 years, we knew what we did not want, but we did not know what we do want. And it took 7 years. And after 7 years, the Netherlands became a republic. That was a trade republic. So we changed from a feudal system with landowners and elite to a more of a citizen society in which the traders were the most important citizens. So we changed from a top-down society, from the elite, to a more of a bottom-up society led by citizens. Now that took 350 years. So 350 years, people in the Netherlands thought, we always will be a republic trading. And that also came to an end, and that started in England with the invention of the machine. That was the Industrial Revolution. It started with spinning jenny, and steam powered engine, and from there machines became more important. That means that industrial mass production became more important than trade. Now, one machine doesn't change anything, and not 10 and 100 and 1,000, but at some point, industrial mass production became more important than trade. And again, we came in the same situation. This is called the Industrial Revolution. So the whole society had to change. Now, what happened there is exactly the same forces as before came, because some people want to have, a top-down society for the elite, and others want to have more power to the people, which is more bottom-up. Now, in the Netherlands, we came from a republic into a monarchy again, which is, the sort of victory of the elite. And at the same time, there came some kind of democracy, and that is the voice of the people. So the industrial society was actually a combination of the two. Now, if you see now what are the largest companies in the world, these are not industrial companies anymore. So industrial mass production is not the most important source of economic value creation. The largest companies are tech companies, finance, foods, and pharmaceutical companies, which means that, again, as I predicted, we are in the middle of a change from industrial society to society 4.0. That's basically what I describe.
Yeah, and for me, one of the important facets of that is that when you have these companies that look to be economically stronger than the individual nation states. This is something that you've pointed out before. If we look at a Google or an Amazon, their value is they're more than most countries, than what most countries can provide, what their GDPs are. Then you get into a situation where the companies have more power over the interests of the individual country, the individual nation states. So if a company like Amazon or Google decides that they're going to leave the United States or they're going to leave their offices in the UK, that's going to have a massive impact. So those countries are going to do what they can to massage the ego of, or do whatever it takes to keep those companies there and let them essentially rule the roost in essence. You see it with the lobbyists in the US, and the US is a very easy way to look at this from the outside because of the fact that their process, as opaque as it is quite transparent in that everyone knows that the lobbyists in the US have power, and those lobbyists work for the interests of the corporate entities. But one of the important aspects here is you mentioned that the Dutch went from a republic back into a monarchy. One of the beautiful things of a republic, which we spoke about on the phone, is the fact that you have a constitution, and that constitution is supposed to enshrine the rights of the citizenry of that country. Now, this is something that's obviously been lost to time. And when you get to a position like we're in now in a democracy, you mentioned already the situation that we've had in the last 2 to 3 years with the coronavirus situation and the impacts that that had on society. What we saw in a democracy is that the rights of the individual can be infringed upon. So as we step into this society 4.0, is there anything that we can do to try to re-enshrine the rights of the individual, despite the fact that Society 4.0, which I'm sure we're going to get onto, is going to be looking at things in a much bigger perspective than an individual nation state? It's an important factor to keep in mind.
Yeah, this is a very important factor because so far, it's also if as a company you want to do business in England, you have to adapt yourself and accept the laws and the regulations in the United Kingdom. But now the companies are larger than countries. That's a completely new situation. The Facebooks and all the largest companies, they are larger than countries, larger than the Netherlands, larger than the UK, larger than France, larger than. And in my book, I call them corporate states because so far we have always been working with countries making decisions. But now countries are relatively small and weak, and we have companies, I call them corporate states. They work at a global level, not at a national level, and they're much more powerful and rich than countries. So the power balance has changed completely. And there's another factor which is important, which is that most of the issues that we are facing cannot be solved at the national level. If we talk about the climate, or we're talking about healthcare, or we tell all kind of or energy, all the things that we're talking about, what can you do as a country? You know, you're not at the global level, so there needs to be something at the global level. Now, the last 100 years, we have seen a growth of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and the non-governmental organizations, they are focusing on one domain, can be energy or health or whatever. 100 years ago, there were 400 NGOs. At this moment, there are 40,000 NGOs. So you could say there are 40,000 ministries at the global level. Now, there are a couple of problems with that. The first is these NGOs are no democracies. Yeah, these are activists, basically, very often funded with money from companies. And a lot of those NGOs also work very, very closely with those corporate states, with the companies, because they combine their interests. One wants to be rich and the other one wants to be powerful. And that's a sort of combination that you can expect. And so far, is there one thing we have not done in the last 100 years, which is thinking about democracy at a global level. There is no democracy at the global level. There's very indirect democracy from the Netherlands to Europe, but at the global level, there's no democracy. So if powerful and rich parties work together in their interest, without the feedback of citizens, how do you want to have a society? Then something goes wrong, and you see that in a number of fields, not all of them, because most people are okay, most NGOs are okay, most companies are okay, but history has always been dependent on those people or companies or countries that are not okay, and that's basically what's happening now. Yeah, so some of them have gone on the pathway. There's no democratic feedback, and that's where things go wrong. So the corona crisis is more of a crisis that gets control over people. There will also be a climate crisis, as you know. Yeah? So there will be another lockdown, with a climate lockdown.
India
That
have
has
already
nothing to
started
do
those,
with, it's nothing to do with healthcare, it's nothing to do with the climate. This is about that are people who want to form a new society at the global level, which is again, like in a feudal society, a sort of feudal top-down society with a small group of powerful and rich organizations and people, with most of the people have no power and no money. That's basically what they're heading at. And I explained that in the industrial society there was also a clash between top-down and bottom-up. We went back to a monarchy, but also there came some kind of democracy. And the things we need to do, and that's the thing that we try to do as Society 4.0, based on the vision in my book, is to build a citizen society. So to be a factor in which the interests of everyone in society is served. And basically what we need to do is reinvent democracy also. So what I did is describe how that future could look like. We try to mobilize people to stand together, and then as a sort of counterforce against the top-down society, just like in the industrial society, we were there, reinvent democracy, and then together come in some kind of dialogue and invent a new society at the global level.
So there's a couple points there. Now, you mentioned that there's this global force that wanted to have control and take control, and in essence, utilization of things like the corona crisis has been a massive boon for them. If you look, there's in the order of $3 trillion has moved from the middle class into the upper class of society, and that middle class has shifted down into the lower class, so to speak. We're seeing a shrinkage of the middle class, which is the opposite of what we saw in decades prior, where the middle class was then starting to expand. People were lifting themselves up out of necessarily poverty, but up out of lower socioeconomic statuses into higher brackets. That's really important to get one's head around. However, someone who's not aware might turn around and say, but Bob, do you know what? The people that are at the top got there because they're good at what they do. So perhaps there is something to this idea of a corporatocracy, of a global level top-down approach, because they've managed to build their companies. And during their reign, so to speak, in individual nation states, we did see nations prosper. So what is it that could so inherently be bad or dangerous about quote unquote reset of a great kind?
Well, there are people, and I go back to Plato, he said, the big decisions has to be taken by the people that are literate and rich and powerful. He did not believe in the ability of citizens to make the right decisions. And there are still people believing that. There are still people who believe that, I don't believe in democracy because people are stupid. It's better to let the decision being made by the people that are in power. There are people who believe that. I don't have an opinion about that. It's not my preference, because I believe in the wisdom of the crowd. I believe in the wisdom of the people, and therefore I believe in democracy. But it has always been that there are people who believe in top down is the best, and others believe that bottom up is the best. That's at the moment exactly the same. And the change that we're in, to Society 4.0, is an autonomous development. Yeah, it's not because some people are bad people. It doesn't start there. It starts because industrial mass production is not anymore the most important way to create economic value. These are the tech, the finance, pharma, and food companies. These are the most important. So, and then always you get a transformation to a new society. And as always, there are two different perspectives, a top-down perspective and a bottom-up perspective. So I see it as a sort of chess play. In this transition, they say we have to go to a different kind of society. If you believe in a top-down society and you have your interest to have a top-down society, you take a number of steps, just like a chess play. Yeah, you take a number of steps to get there. That's what they do. And they started with white because they started in March 2020. So they play a chess play in white. And I found it interesting how they play. You know, if they take a move, I'm looking at that, say, interesting move. We play with black. Yeah, so we see how they move, and we take a counter movement. And at the end, you know, there will be some kind of dialogue between top-down thinking and bottom-up thinking, like always. And now at the global level, I don't know where it ends, but somehow we have to combine all the interests of everyone, of the citizens, to be a serious player with black. Basically, that's what it is. And what you see is that in most countries, there has been a very fragile democracy. You see that in not only in the UK, in the Netherlands, in the US, basically everywhere. You're referring to lobbyists. Well, imagine that in every country, those companies are larger than countries. There's so much money and so much power. And they do that to serve their interest. And they also do that through politics. So one of the difficult things is that the current democratic system is not fit for the situation that we're in. That is old industrial democracy. There's so much money and so much interest involved. And therefore, politicians get influenced by the lobbyists. You know, in Europe, every politician has at least 2 lobbyists, you know, which give them all the information. So that's an example of how we have to go to a different kind of society.
That's an interesting one there with the lobbyists. I don't know if you're familiar with an ex-governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura. He's also an ex-Navy SEAL, etc., etc. A very prolific man. He flat out refused during his governorship to have any meetings with anyone that was a lobbyist or representative of company X, Y, or Z, purely because he felt that he was there to serve the people rather than corporate interests. And that is the one and only time that I've heard of a politician, at least, saying no, flat out, shutting the door in the face of and working for the citizenry as it was. But that's Jesse Ventura. That's the US. One of the issues that I do see, and this isn't even me playing devil's advocate here, is a lot of people who vote are voting uninformed. They're not voting with knowledge of both the party they're voting for or the people they're voting for or what they stand for. If we look at this at a local level here in the Netherlands, BBB, Borden voor Bevolking en Beweging, I think is the party. People voted for them because they assumed that they were a party that was going to stand up for farmers' rights, purely based on the fact that they were for farmers, right? That was in the name. But then BBB was another acronym for Build Back Better. However, nobody sort of stopped at that moment to look at what policies BBB was looking to make and to bring into play. And actually, when you look at it, they were no different than Mark Rutte's party in the grand scheme of things. So,
but you know, it's a good example. In the Netherlands, there was quite a revolution in politics, you know, in the parliament. And
yes and no.
Yeah, well, you know, the point is that most politicians they become a politician because they want to have power.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they do that. These are opportunistic people normally.
There's studies done that show most that people in politics have psychopathic tendencies as a result to gain power.
That's over the top, but you know, power attracts certain
tendencies.
Kind of
they're not psychopaths, but they have the tendencies.
And in their environment, there are all kind of very powerful and rich parties give them information and also all kind of promises. And most politicians have the tendency to follow, you know, the traces of power, and that's what they normally do. Not all of them. You gave the example of that politician in the United States. Not all of them, but most of them do. The revolution in the Netherlands was that there was so much discomfort with the current political parties. I think that 80% of the Dutch did not trust the government anymore, which is an enormous. That has never happened. And as a sort of counter reaction, they went to another party who at least promised, you know, to fulfill the needs of the farmers and of the citizens. Farmers is boeren, as a B, and citizens are burgers. There's also a B, so that's where BB come from. Now you can say that they did not meet up the promises, but so far you see that they have the voice of the people and have the voice of the farmers. And that's again, you know, that clash between top down and bottom up. And let's not forget one thing. If you look in the past, in the transition to a new society, from society 1 to society 2 to society 3, and now also society 4, it takes some time before people understand what's going on. It takes some time for the majority to accept we have to go in a transition, because most of the people don't want to see it, or they don't want to accept it. And there are also always a small people who are sensitive to see that's happening, and they're also open for change. There's also always a small group, and that's the small group that makes the beginning of the transition. But the last who sees that something has to change, and the last group who has interest to change that, is the current power. Because if you're the current power, you want to stay, you know, you want to sit put. For example, after the feudal time with the landowners, there were kings, you know, and emperors and tsars, you know. They didn't leave by itself, you know. They have to be kicked out, you know. So the tsars have been murdered, and some kings have been murdered, or kings have to kicked out of the country. And the Netherlands, we said to Philip II to go back to Spain, you know, we're going to do it ourselves. They never go by itself. And that's it at this situation also. The current politicians don't have an interest to go. Yeah. So you need to find those politicians that you're mentioning in the United States. We have some in the Netherlands too. You know, there are some politicians that don't go for the power, but they're very open to it. They're strong enough to stand for themselves. They stick to their principles, and we have to find them in every country, because these are the ones who can change the democratic system from the bottom up. And you will see that for the next years will be a battle of different perspectives, where to go to. And what you see is that in every country there will be a small number of politicians standing up and say, hey folks, we have to change. What we're doing now is not good, and we have to do it differently. And these are the people we have to focus on, and not the majority, because, well, we know that the majority of citizens still don't know what's happening. Most of the politicians have no idea what's happening, or they have no interest in changing. So we have to do it ourselves. Come with a good vision, and that's what my book Society 4 was meant to, a vision on a hopeful future of our society, and then mobilize as many people and as many politicians, say, okay, we go in a transition, we go to Society 4.0, a different governance system, a different tax system, a different political system, political system, and let's move then. And at some point of time, we have to leave the old system and have to start with a new one.
So then, as we mentioned at the start of the podcast, we're at the cusp of that societal revolution. We've already mentioned that the society can go into one of two directions, one of which is the sort of elite reset society, what you've already mentioned, of a global top-down society. If you look at the UN and the WHO, they're currently trying to amass enough power to be able to enact their own laws and regulations over nation states who are member states. And this is something that's continually being voted over for the past year or two. What is the other option then? That option that then goes from the bottom up that you speak about in the book?
Yeah. Well, actually, this is the other perspective in which we start reorganize society from the interests of the citizens. Now, what's very important to understand is that the importance of the country, as the most important decision-making level, is relatively recent. That has something to do with the upscaling of the industrial production. Because of mass production, companies became bigger, and therefore countries became more important. But for most of the history of mankind, countries were not that important. The most important was the region. If you look at all kind of regions, then you see there's a very long culture, very long history, sometimes even their own language. Well, in the UK, you have a number of languages with very proud people within the kingdom. The Netherlands, we have that too. So if you go back to the citizens, then basically what you do is you go back to the cultural roots of a society, which is a region. And what you can do is we go to a region, and I give a lot of presentations, and if I come somewhere and I tell about the importance of a region and ask them, what is your region? Everyone knows what the region is. There's still, for hundreds of years, something thousands of years, a pride of their language, of their culture, of their history. What they have gone through in history. And if you go back there, then people feel connected again with the most important decisions. So if you want to reorganize society and you want to redesign a democracy, you start in the region. And what you can do, and you can also use all kind of technology like blockchain technology. You can use blockchain technology for direct democracy. So if it's about their own environment of the citizens, for example, building a bridge or roads or houses or farms or so, and most of the things you can organize at the regional level, and you can directly involve citizens in making that decision. You don't need some sort of parties, with all kind of ideas of how society is going to look like, and whether it's socialism or capitalism or whatever. These are very abstract concepts. But if you go back to the most important thing like education, healthcare, bridges, and that kind of thing, you can involve people directly in making those decisions. Now, and what you then can do, if you organize some kind of blockchain-based direct democracy, you can also represent the region at a higher level. So, for example, in Europe, you can also redefine Europe as the united Europe of regions. Yeah, and then every region is represented at some kind of European level, in which that representative must meet two criteria. One is the criteria of integrity, because that's one problem of most politicians. Yeah, because of all the power and the money. Yeah, a lot of them, because of that. Yeah, in the Netherlands, 80% of the politicians are not be trusted. And that has to do with the integrity. Yeah, and the integrity, the lack of integrity, is related to power and money, and uncertainty over time. And the second is competence. So if you want to represent a region in Europe, you need a number of competences to do that, like negotiation and a number of things that you need to, or you need technical skills, or it depends what you're doing there. So what I did in my newest book, Democracy 4.0, is made a new design for democracy based on that the politicians meet criteria of integrity and competence. And if you then have competent, integer representative of the public, not of the large companies, but representative of the public, for example, at the European level or at the UK level, or what kind of level you want. And that would solve the issue that we have now.
Okay, so it's still a society with politicians, but those politicians are a little bit more at the behest of the citizens in the individual states, as it were. And then you mentioned the direct democracy as well. So it's a combination there where through the direct democracy, every individual citizen is able to vote. Again, I come back to the idea that citizens don't necessarily know entirely what they're voting for. And it's one of the things that can be weaponized, as we saw it had been weaponized for things like Brexit, as we saw that it has been weaponized for the US elections, as we saw that not knowing what you're voting for has been weaponized in the Netherlands as well, to ensure that people vote in a particular way. You know, you get an emotional reaction, it causes a more of a visceral reaction out of people, and they will do what you want. And one of the big things there is that it's weaponized due to a lack of people's integrity. What would be your suggestion to address that integrity factor then, as that will be a fundamental aspect in the creation of a new society?
Yeah, well, the integrity is very important, and what I said, people can be involved in the things that concerns their own environment. Like hospitals and roads and bridges. That people can decide for that. When it comes to a higher level, like Brexit or these are abstract and they're very complex, and people don't know what they're voting for, and then they become vulnerable for all kind of information of lobbyists and all kind of other information that put a lot of money in making people believe something. But basically, that's not a good way to do that. Now, the system that I want to solve it with is that if there's a representatives from a region, they must meet a public merit score, as I call it. And public merit scores relate to integrity and competence, what I said just before. And what I did is I actually took an example in China for inspiration for my thinking.
So the social credit score. Yeah.
In China, you have a social credit score that actually started in Singapore as a safety project. They said, we want that Singapore will be the safest city in the world. Therefore, we have to make sure that all the crooks are at home in the evening, because if we know who the crooks are and we put them at home, then all our children can be safe on the streets. Yeah, basically that's what they were thinking. Now that has been also adopted by China, and now 2.3 billion Chinese have a social credit score, and it means that everything that they do is part of that score. How you behave, how you drive in traffic. How you serve, how you pay, everything has been done. So you have to earn your citizenship. That's basically what it is. And if you have a high score, well, then you can get a passport and a driving license, and your children go to school. And if you have a low score, well, no passport, no driving license, and children cannot go to school. That's the system over there. Now, what I did is I turned it around. And I said, here in Europe, we have a different kind of culture. I think that we need to be free. So as citizens, you're completely free. Yeah, unless you spoil it, of course. Yeah, if you kill someone, you go behind bars, of course. But normally you're free until proven differently. But if you want to represent the public, then you need to have a high public merit score, which is in reverse from China. So if you want to represent the public, then you have to get all your information, your driving license. You have to see how you move, who your friends are, if you have a relationship with large companies. Then you have to be very open about everything. So normally you're free, but if you want to represent the public, then you have to go in all your information, and then you get a score. And with that, and you do that all the time, not only once, but you continue looking at your score. And if someone doubts your integrity, you immediately can make a sort of democratic meeting and look at the score again. But then you're sure that someone who represents Scotland, for example, which is a Scottish, of course, that's a Scottish with a high public merit score, and they represent Scotland for example, in Europe. Then you're sure that these people are not being manipulated by money and by power and by all kinds of other things. That was my score. So actually, I used the social credit score in China as an inspiration, but then reverse it basically. That's it. And if you want to be free, don't become a politician. And don't forget that a politician now, it has maybe, I don't know how it's in England, but and now it has a sort of a negative connotation. Are you a politician? Oh, negative. But don't forget that there must be people who making decisions for the public good. That's what a politician is doing. And if you do it right and you have the right system, then you select politicians making the right decisions for the public. And we need those people. But we need to change the system. Because a certain system always attracts a certain kind of people. So if you make a good system, you attract good people. If you have a corrupt system, you attract corrupt people. That's how it works.
Fair enough. And I think that, explains how we have the politicians that we have today. Again, looking at the US, the amount of corrupt politicians that have walked in and out of both the Senate and the White House. If you look at someone like Nancy Pelosi, she's a multimillionaire despite being on a politician's salary. It's ridiculous. But
we always look at people. People are not good. There are corrupt people. But what I'm saying is that a corrupt system attracts those people. And these people, it's not their fault.
They're taking advantage of the system that they have to play with. They can only play with the ball that they've got on the court.
That's it.
The one thing that scares me with this idea, this notion of using the social credit score, is I think it's a bit simplistic the way that you've described it as it pertains to the Chinese. There are people there that they might have littered, and as a result of that, they can no longer buy a train ticket or something. As innocuous as that has now led to massive complications for the rest of their life. They might not be able to let their children go to school. It gets to the point where they have public shaming as well. If you were to go to the train station, for example, they have boards up on the walls that are pointing out who's a good citizen, who's a bad citizen. And people think that this is outright acceptable. I appreciate that you're trying to flip it so that the general citizenry is okay. The general citizenry can crack on as we are today. And the politicians are the ones that need to be aware of that. However, one of the big things is any tool that can be used for good, we should absolutely look at where the negatives are and how it can be used in a negative light, and how there may be ways around it. You've mentioned blockchain as a method for direct democracy. If we were to use something like blockchain for politicians' communication.
It is not a method, it's a technology, but go ahead.
The technology through which that we are aware of a politician's messaging that they do between different parties, so that we know if they're being honest or not. Eventually, there'll be a way that they can bypass that and find ways to make deals and look like they have a good citizen score, but at the same time still work against the citizenry. That I feel like it's a method that could potentially run into hiccups through its own doing.
Well, first about China, let's not forget that I don't want to make a system for China, because China has a completely different kind of history than Europe. Don't forget that. And so I don't want to advise China what to do, because it's their country, their culture, they know it better. What I do is I try to pick up the European culture, our own history. We have a history of fighting for our freedom and having democratic rights. That's our past, and from there I work. Now, indeed, what you're saying is that every system has weaknesses, and probably my system has weaknesses too. I think it's much better than the current system, so I think it would be a major improvement. And one of the things is that, is my statement, you can fool most of the people most of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. So once you have a public merit score and someone says, something is not right, here I have information, and you bring it in, then you can have a discussion about if that public merit score is okay. And if there are proof, and they come with documents or, statements or whatever, then that changes the merit score, and that also can mean that that person is not representing that region anymore. It's a much quicker and better, directer way of getting feedback from the public on that public score. Is it perfect? Probably not. Is it much better? I believe so. It's much better than that.
Okay. So that's the political aspect where we don't then have to give away our sovereignty, as it were, to be it NGOs or corrupt governments. There's another element to Society 4.0 as well. There's the what's going to happen with the citizenry as one of the things that is occurring. One of the things that is pushing us forward towards this revolution is, or upheaval, the fact that AI is becoming such a big factor, is the fact that technology is becoming such a big factor. So there's also that thing that goes next to it. What is the impact that that's going to have? Because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be out of a job. This conversation could be done by 2 AI bots soon enough. You could probably find people able to do mine in your day job, or computers able to do mine in your day jobs.
This is exactly why is it so important to make a better society with a better democracy. Because in 2030, probably have heard about the Agenda 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't understand what the Agenda 2030 is. But 2030 is the moment when people expect that AI will surpass humans. Yeah. So why are there 8 billion people on the planet? Not because we are stronger or we run faster, because we're more intelligent. So the reason, because we are more intelligent than rabbits and zebras, makes that we have taken over the world. That's the reason. But in 2030, there will be life, can be artificial life. I come to that later. But there comes some kind of intelligence surpassing human beings. And they can go to an IQ of 300. If the average human has 100, then artificial intelligence can have an IQ of 300. Then the distance between humans and ants will be the same as between artificial intelligence and humans.
Yeah.
That is happening in 2030, and we already see that happening now. Yeah, I followed this trend already for 20 years, so I knew it was coming. And what we can do with artificial intelligence is, and then in 2030, when it surpasses humans, you can combine with robots. We call that humanoids. But also happening for Neuralink, a new company from Elon Musk. They're preparing to upgrade some people to an IQ of 300. So you make a sort of hybrid between humans and technology. We call that cyborgs. So as from 2030, there will be humanoids and cyborgs. Now, the question is then, who is going to decide in 2030 what to do with it? And you can imagine that if you have an intention of having a top-down society from the global level, from a number of NGOs and large companies, well, who they want to make the decisions. They say, that elite of rich and powerful people, they make the decision what to do with those hybrid humanoids and cyborgs. And the people, well, they are just slaves, they have to listen to us. And what we say is, technology, this is an autonomous development. The same with nuclear energy. Nuclear power is also very powerful and very dangerous. But how did we make the decisions? And at the end, we found a way to curb that kind of danger. Here, what we do is we go back to nature, we go back to citizens, we make a decision which is good for the planet, good for the people, and then you can make use of artificial intelligence in a positive way. Just that way that you can use nuclear energy in a positive way, and you can make bombs with it. That's the difference. And here's exactly the same. Here, what you can do is people with brain damage, you can help them, to function again. But that's the importance of what's happening. In 2030, we need to have a different kind of society at the global level and at the regional level. And we need to have a new democratic system. And we have to make the decisions what to do with those technologies, with artificial intelligence, by 2030. And 2030 will be the most important year in the history of mankind.
One thing that's really important, what you brought up there, is the Elon Musk factor. People look to Elon as a savior, as someone who provided free speech back on Twitter, as someone who is going to help push humanity. But as you mentioned, Elon Musk is in charge of Neuralink. Elon Musk does believe in transhumanism, in this idea of upgrading the human being. And no one really knows what that is going to mean in the long term. Or if we take the implant, for example, will we still have free will, or will we think we have free will, but our ideas and our notions are pre-programmed into said chip? As this idea of transhumanism in and of itself is also quite dangerous. Now, you mentioned in your book, Sapiens 1.0, us, Sapiens 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, etc. As we go through that, from designer babies at Sapiens 2.0, utilizing CRISPR technology to eliminate certain genes or improve on certain genes, or 3.0 with things like chips, or 4.0 where we become that cyborg, as we move through those different levels, yes, there's the element of artificial intelligence, but are we not going to lose that human element? And people like Elon Musk are almost pushing us towards losing that human element. And again, coming back to this idea of him being a savior, he's recently appointing someone who's a WEF, a known World Economic Forum person, into the CEO position of Twitter. And he pushes the idea of transhumanism, of this upgrade of society, etc. The only big positive there is that he also believes we're heading into a societal collapse, so we need more people. But aside from that, a lot of his ideas are also something to be weary of.
Well, again, the development of artificial intelligence and autonomous development, if we like it or not, this happening
It's
anyway.
happening. Yeah.
It's happening anyway. Now, at this moment, we have no good decision-making structure, no governance structure to decide what to do with it. So now we have an undemocratic or not well-functioning democratic system making decisions. And some people pop up, especially in the tech world. If you talk about Microsoft or Meta or Amazon, these are rich and they are powerful, and they pick up these technologies very quickly. Now, you can say from Elon Musk what you want. I give him the benefit of the doubt at this moment. And you cannot say, don't establish Neuralink, because if he doesn't, someone else does. So yeah. And I've looked at Elon Musk a couple of times, and he acquired Twitter, and he brought in the open how Twitter was censoring people. He gave all the Twitter files in which we learned a lot. Now, I think he didn't have to do it. He could also say, okay, the Twitter, that's it. But he bought it. He invested a lot of money in that because he found it important to have open information, and he didn't like censorship. But now I can tell you there were a number of other people who had made different decisions. So so it's autonomous decision, autonomous development. And I think Elon Musk is not the worst of all. I think even that he put his position on that. And one thing is very important to understand, which is we have to change as a human being. We have to do that. We have to go to a higher level, because in the industrial age, we have become sort of robots from flesh. We became machines, working. We even called humans human resources, as if we are just production factors, and that's it. And also, if you look at the thousands of years of humanity, we have been thinking about, the purpose of life, how to get harmony with nature and with higher spirits and all that. We have always been that, and in the industrial age, we became more of, let's say, human resources, factors in a production factory. Basically that's what it was. Now in 2030 and also the years towards that, you will see that humans are not human resources anymore, because all that work is being taken over by technology. which means that we don't be a robot anymore, but humans have to be human again. So we go also back to the period where we're thinking about our relationship with higher spirits and with nature and together and make a society together from. So we have to go to a higher level of society. We also have to go a higher level of humans. If I characterize, let's say, the level of humans in the industrial society, well, that is, they get a diploma, they get to work, they get an income. From the income, you buy a house and a car. You go 3 times per year on vacation, and the rest of the year you're sitting eating on the couch, eating chips and drinking Coca-Cola for the rest of the year, and watching a television program. Well, I cannot call that a pinnacle of humanity, to be honest. So and with the competition of technology that I just mentioned, we are not going to survive. So we have to go to a higher level of humans. And if you accept that there will be intelligent machines as an alternative for humans, as the most intelligent on the earth, what we have to do is to develop and focus on the human side of humans, including the soul, the spirit, humanity, spirituality, if you like. We have to focus on the real issues. And that requires a higher level of people. I call that Sapiens 4.0. But we have to take that step. Now, if we see we are in a crisis, and in the crisis is also an important part of that, is to recognize that we have to make that jump as human being to Sapiens 4.0. And to develop ourselves to a higher level. And we need a shock, because if there's no shock, people are not going to move. So we need a shock to say, we have to go to the next level. We don't have work anymore. Oh, what I'm doing on this planet. And then starts a process to get to a higher level human being. And I think that's the good news about it. In the future, we don't have to work. And we will be a higher level humans with more cooperation, more humanity, more spirit, and a better soul. So I think it's good news.
There's already a mental health crisis going on in the world with people, and some people feel that one of the reasons for them having mental health issues is the fact that they don't have a purpose on this planet. And for some people, they find their purpose in their work. There's many people who, if you were to take their job away, they would spiral massively. What I would say to that is, if we get into a position where we don't have as many people who need to work or even have a position to work in society, is that not going to lead to a further mental health crisis? Because one of the things that has happened as the industrial age has developed is you went from factories of thousands of people to factories with tens of people, because robots are doing so much of that work. Now, if you're going to take that from tens of people to zeros of people, and everything is done by the robots and humans are doing nothing, we have a choice of going to that Wall-E kind of society, that children's movie from a few years back, where humans are no longer using their legs, they're just riding around on hover pods, they're eating chips and Coca-Cola, and that's all they do, or humans that no longer have a purpose. So I think, long story short, my question here is, how can we encourage people to do something productive when there's nothing to strive for? Because if we also don't have a reason to work, how are we going to earn our incomes and earn our positions in society? I work so that I can pay my bills and do things with my family. If I don't have to work, how am I going to get those things?
Yeah, well, I agree with you that there's a lot of young people mainly who don't know, have all kind of psychological problems because of the lack of purpose. I understand that. At the same time, we have to redefine what's important and what the purpose of life is. If I look at young people, what I see is that say, well, what you did, work 40 hours a week, go to factory every day and come back, sit watching television. I don't know if that's if that's a good answer to the purpose question, and intuitively, they don't want that. They don't want that. But if you know what you don't want, does not mean that you know what you do want. Yeah, that's the same with a society. You don't want that society, but that does not mean that you know what you want as a society. No, that's what a lot of young people are in that middle position. And let's be honest, go to work, get a lot of money, and buy a car. Young people don't find that. A lot of young people say, "Well, that's not my purpose." If I look at my daughter, 24 years, she works 2 days a week. Then she goes making music. Then she goes talking with friends, chilling.
Yeah.
You see that intuitively, they don't want to step in that machine. In that industrial production machine. They don't want that. You see that they're looking incrementally, trying to finding out what kind of life they do want. And let's focus it, and let's face it. In this planet, there are so many things that need to be improved. That is the harmony with nature again, and also cooperation within people. The focus on people's happiness, on health, on education. There are so many things that have improved. I don't know it is in your country, but in the Netherlands, everything is almost broke. So the whole society have to be picked up. And what you see is that there are a number of initiatives here in my country, in the Netherlands. One of them is called Agenda 2029, interestingly. And they're for young people. And they said, come on, folks, let's not be depressive, let's start working and let's make a better world. In the old world, they make it a mess and a lot of spoiling, and we have to do it better. And you see, step by step, they will pick up and they will define the purpose in their life, not in terms of money or working hard here or eating chips on the couch or watching television, but doing purposeful things. And if you want to do purposeful things, then the first thing you need to do is to know what makes you happy as an individual. And that's another thing that needs to be changed, because in the industrial society, everyone had to be programmed as robots because they had to go to work, So the individuality and the uniqueness of the individual was ignored. That was not a good idea. So you get all kind of people want to be part of a Mars group. Now, in this current society, you need to first dig in yourself. Who am I? What makes me tick? What is the purpose? What are my talents? And how can I, if I first understand myself, the highest you can become is yourself, isn't it? So first, if you know who you are, and then step down to a contribution. And what is not working anymore is having an old industrial system and telling the young people to adopt to that system, and that leads to a sort of a crisis, a cyclical crisis. What the heck am I doing here? So I see that as a part of that transition to a different society with different people, different purpose. And in the coming years, that will be more clear to people. Okay, we go for it and build a better world.
So then, how are people going to trade in this society if they're not going to potentially have a job to do? How are people going to be able to buy things? Or let's say we're sitting in this society in 7 years' time. How is it that your daughter's going to be chilling and hanging out with her friends if she hasn't been working 2 days prior to put some euros together to go to the coffee shop?
Well, the old system was that you go to work, then you get the income, and then you can spend it. That's the old system. Yeah. But you can also say, that also means that the whole monetary system, the money system, has to change. For example, I am very good. I'm become very happy in helping my neighbor to go shopping. For example, she is old, she cannot do it herself, and I like to do that. Now, we have created a capitalistic system in which the things that are worthless cost a lot of money, and the things that are very valuable are not paid. So if I do something for my neighbor, I get not paid, as if that's not worth anything. And if you go to McDonald's, you go somewhere to a restaurant and buy a hamburger, then you have to pay a lot of money for that bullshit.
Yeah.
So we have a problem with pricing.
The value is not there. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we go take the value there, where is real societal value, and we make a monetary system with, for example, a regional currency in which you pay in terms of hours. Yeah, you do 10 hours working for someone else. And with that hours, you can buy things, which requires a different kind of monetary system, different kind of currency, of course. So the whole economic system has to change. But in principle, it's possible. Yeah, it's only that for most of the things that are good for society is not or badly paid for. And the things that are worthless or bad are very good paid for. Now, we have to redefine that whole system.
This is one of the things that's wound me up in I'd probably say the last decade, looking at people that don't provide any value to society. So if we look at, was it Vice News and BuzzFeed have recently collapsed, two quote unquote news agencies who have collapsed. Now, they were paying their writers tens of thousands of dollars to give nothing back to society, and yet you have people who, let's say your electrician or your plumber, now if they're self-employed they're making a decent bit of paper, but otherwise without these people we cannot function, who might just be getting by on your average wage, so to speak, but we need them inherently for society to function and work. Your cleaner does a hell of a lot more than, let's say, for example, your hairdresser, but will happily spend $150 at the hairdresser, but the cleaner is looked down on in society. So I get this idea of what you're saying.
How do you know what the price of a haircutter is?
I've seen my wife's bill. Thankfully, I do this myself. But
look at my hair, I need a haircut,
It looks great. You probably get it colored every now and then, or
no,
not yet. But then, if we look at that, we're almost creeping back towards a social credit score style of functioning, whereby your value is determined by what you're doing within the rest of society, and that slow creep towards social credit of, hey, I did this nice thing for my neighbor, can I go watch the movies now? It's a scary concept in some ways.
I don't know, there has been research and asking people what makes you most happy. 80% of the people said, if I help someone else. That's a basic need, People become happy by helping other people. If they also being paid in hours that you give societal work or in a different way, then it's also appreciated. With that, if we all work on a better society, we make a better society, which makes us more happy. It's not so bad, And the same if you want to be an artist, and you want to be a musician, That's also, if you're really a musician, well, let's look what the societal value is, or for an artist, what the societal value is, or a plumber, and do it ourselves. But therefore, you have to go back to the region, because then you together as a society, the citizen society, what do we find important? Someone who is looking for the forest and take the old trees out. Or leaving the dogs out, or helping old people, or helping young children, or educate young children the deeper wisdom of life. These are important societal aspects. Now, if that is valued, then you make a better society. And I think we have to go there. And it's not something that I decide or top down is being decided what's important. No, as a society, you have to say that. What do we find important? And then act upon it and appreciate it and value it. I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, What you're doing is also a societal contribution.
I hope so.
You have a good channel and you want to distribute that. I'm very grateful to that, because I'm a writer. I want to that a lot of people read my books. So we have and
mutual interests.
Yeah, so we have mutual interest. Now, I'm sitting for 2 hours in your show. And then I say, okay, I'll do that for you. And then you come 2 hours here and leave my dog out.
I'll bring mine. They'll have a great time. Yeah. But then when we look at that, and again, I think it's the idea of where can this also be on the negative side of things. If we look at, are you familiar with Yeonmi Park? She is a dissident from North Korea, managed to escape. Her book is makes for a fascinating read, but one of the things that she talks about there is that in order to get some kind of funds, because in North Korea, being a communist country, it's not so easy for people to get by. Her father worked in the market trading things, which also was illegal. Things like that, something that again would seem innocuous, a man going to trade to provide value and get some value back in so that he could get his kids clothes, food, etc., etc. If we're getting into a society whereby everything is monitored, it's going to be far more difficult for people to function independently or truly independently than everything. You're going to be completely dependent on whether or not someone sees you as valuable. So again, we come back almost in a way in swings and roundabouts to this idea of social credit. Again, and I know, over time, this is something that's going to develop. That's why you have the website societyfourth.org for people to come together and further develop these ideas as well. And by no means is what your book is today, the way you envision everything being implemented in society. There's always room for growth and improvement. But a notion of social credit has so many dangers attached to it. There has to be
but then again, a social credit score is a system in China and also in other parts of Asia, which is an example of a top-down society in which a small group decides what to do for the larger public. That's the whole system. And communism has been exactly the same as a feudal age, but then the landowners were replaced by citizens forming a party, but basically they behaved exactly the same. So there's not much difference. In North Korea, that's still the same. It's a communistic top-down system in which people have no freedom. We have also seen it in Eastern Germany. They are also behind the Iron Curtain, having no, in the democratic system, no freedom, and by the way, no money also. So that's exactly the opposite what I want. The only thing that I say is we all need all to be free. We are free. But if you want to represent others, then you need to meet the criteria of integrity and competence. That's the only thing I do. You're always free unless you say, I want to represent the people, and then you give all your information because they have to check whether you're integer and competent. And furthermore, if you more bottom up, as a society, as humanity, you make the decisions together in a more democratic way, and you do it in a way that is valuable for society, and you appreciate people being themselves and build up a new society. I agree with you. I don't have all the answers. I have no ultimate wisdom. I don't have that. But I work on this for 10 years, so I have some background, and I have some experience in thinking about the future.
Yeah.
And people say I'm a good writer, and I try to share them with people and invite people to improve my ideas. And if there are people who are readers or listeners to your show, say, well, it's a nice book, but I have some better ideas. I'm open to it, because the more you know, you don't know. Yeah. Most of the people who think they know everything don't know anything, basically. So if you have good ideas, and I'm very open to it, and let's do it. But there's one thing that I want to mention also with, I see your eyes, and the way you try to formulate questions. I think there's a good way to make a better future, and it's much better for your healthcare, for your health in general, is that you focus on positive things. Because if you have hope, and it can be better, and you want to work on a better society, that's better for your health. And complaining about things that are not good and about people that are not good, about systems that fall, that's negative energy, you know? And people are already, a little bit, what you say with psychological problems, depression and all that. And that is also because there's too much negative information. There's so many negative information, people get depressed of that. And the thing is, to tell those people, also to the people from your show, believe in the future. It's going to be better. The system we come on is a dirty world. It's a broken world in where money is more important than people. In material things are more important than your soul. So there are a lot to improve, and let's do it together. And if you focus on the positive thing, you work on a better society in Society 4.0. You work on being a better person in Sapiens 4.0, and together we make a better future. So if we take the positive stance and collectively stand up, make a better world. Don't forget, the elite has only one enemy: a united people. And if a united people has a positive energy and they want to build on a better world, that's exactly what's going to happen.
I think that's really beautifully put. And I already had my question in mind, which does have a bit of negativity to it. So I apologize in advance, given the fact that my question was going to
be... There are enough people who want to complain.
No,
so invite other people if you want to complain. That's not me.
My question was, in what way can we then, as the people, start moving this? What way can we flap the butterfly's wings to get the ball moving, to increase the amount of steam behind us? And the negative aspect of it was, we've seen Rutte's government fail twice and he's still there. So what way can we, let's say third time's the charm, move this forward?
Okay. Well, first is realize we are in a marathon and not a sprint. Okay? It takes time. Yeah. So you need to be patient. It will not flip overnight. Okay? It will take some time. So that's one. So stay put. Be constant, because it's going to change. That's one. And second, if you look in the society, you see all kind of small initiatives. There are many. In every country where I come, I see small initiatives from a local community, from a local school, from a church. There's so many initiatives going on. And these are the small initiatives that have to grow. And together, if you combine that, you create a better society. So if you want to be active, look at the initiatives that you like, that are close to where your heart is and where your competence is. Start working. Then you're building a new society. Then you work with people that also want to build a society, which is good for the positive stand. And look at the things that are good at the moment. And look at the initiatives that are doing well. And go there and work on that and start making a better society. Then you meet a lot of nice people that makes you very happy. And you also make a better society. So focus on the positive things. There is enough. If you're open to it, there's so much beautiful things that are happening.
That's something that we haven't quite touched on yet. This element of there are many people out there. You're someone who's in an important position. You're a professor at a well-respected, well-known university. And to write this book and to come out and say the things that you have come out and said, a lot of people may have refused to do so, but you've done so in a way that has looked to bring light to an otherwise cloudy situation and provide a positive outlook here. How has it been received on your side of things? And how has it been? You've mentioned you've traveled to places in order to talk about this. How has that been for you? And have you seen more movement over the last few years since the publication of the book and everything as well?
Oh, that's an enormous change. As I said, I was in the Netherlands, probably the first to understand what is going on because of my research. And in the beginning of 2020, when I told my stories, folks, this is not a healthcare crisis, something else is going on. People were looking at me, they were still in a fear, and they didn't want to hear my message, and they were angry at me, If I give a presentation, there were only 20 people, somewhere in the backside of a house or a restaurant. And if I compare that now 3 years later, there are large audiences, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people who understand this is not a healthcare crisis. They understand that there's something else going on. And they're looking for people with a positive message, and also a message that is convincing to them. And that's the thing. And that, of course, I have a position as a university professor. But I see that that's not so much status, but that's my role in the current ecosystem. In the ecosystem, in the transformation to a new society, you need all kind of people, also plumbers and all kind of other people. You also need, but you also have people who can write and think and stand up the somewhere in a room and tell people what's going on and inspire them to start moving. That is my role in the ecosystem. And there's so much difference between 3 years ago and now that is incredible. I was hated in the beginning by many. Now there are only few people who don't like me. Only the people that have a different perspective than me, of course. You can imagine who that is. But most of the people find my story convincing. The positive story and the positive attitude they have to build something new give them energy. And I got, there's so many people and organizations coming to me and said, I believe in you and let's do it. That's an enormous difference. It's hard to manage for me anymore. So
that's fantastic to hear that it's gotten to the point where it's difficult to manage for you as one person. That is a bright spark in the grand scheme of things. And I think that's also a nice way to begin to wrap up. If people want to find out more about this, where can they find you? Where can they find your works? And if they wanted to implement something in their local society, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah. Well, first I would recommend to read my writings, of course. Society 4.0. There is I wrote a second book, Democracy 4.0. That's in Dutch, but it is now being translated, so that will come. From Society 4.0, there's also a Turkish translation. Wow. In the Netherlands there are a lot of Turkish people, and they're very enthusiastic about Society 4.0. So it is translated in Turkish. It's in the bookshelf already. Wow. We are going to promote it in Turkey. Democracy 4.0 will also be translated in English and probably also Turkish in other countries. Furthermore, you can go to our website, society4th.org, which is the website that supports what we are doing. Yeah. Furthermore, I've delivered a lot of speeches and podcasts. Some of them also in English in India and America, and so. So apart from your fantastic show, there are other contributions I gave as well. Yeah. So that's a way to get into it. What we're doing is we're helping with our cooperation, Society 4.0, to build a better society at the regional level, as I said. So the basis of the future society is at the regional level. So we are building independent regions. And we have already 60 or 7 regions that we are talking about to be part of our movement. Not only in the Netherlands, but also in Belgium and Germany, and also in Kenya and Switzerland and South Africa. And so basically, step by step, the message is spreading around. And so if you want to be active and you want to be part of our movement, Society 4.0, contact us. You can go to our website, you'll find the contact details. Then we will help with some knowledge how to build up a better society in your own region. We have the information, the knowledge that you need to build up a society on health, on food, on decentral internet, about democratic decisions, about learning and developing, all kind of societal domains. And then start working on in your own region and build up a better society for you. And if you're a lot older, then also for your children and grandchildren. Let's start and making a better world together.
Fantastic. Bob, Look, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. It's been an enlightening conversation. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for the invitation. It was a pleasure.